I bet. So, when is it that you moved to Austin, and what brought you here?
Well, originally, I moved to Austin with my mom right before 10th grade, like in 1984.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize.
And yeah, we lived here for a year.
As early as that.
And my mom died, and then we moved. I moved to Miami, and lived with my dad. I moved back to Austin in 1991, and then had a band here for a little while after I moved here from Houston. And I lived at the Congress House. I lived in the recording studio. I was like the dude that lived there. And I lived there, I guess I lived there for 2 years. I started Mr. Rocket Baby when I lived there.
Okay.
And then, of course, living in you know, one of the better recording studios in town, we always had access to record and stuff, which was great. A great asset for us when we got started. And then Mr. Rocket Baby was kind of the first real, you know, band I had here.
I'd heard of Mr. Rocket Baby, but that was before I moved here. So what was that sounding like?
You cut right now to this shot of me in like a big top hat, like, oh, smoking cocaine. So, no, what was that like?
That's what that was like.
No, it wasn't like that. Somebody told me that the first time they ever saw us play, he saw us and he was intimidated to talk to us because he just thought we laid around in beanbags in this giant room with white shag carpeting, snorting cocaine, and listening to the Zombies. So,
and how accurate
was
that?
We weren't. It wasn't a cocaine-fueled band, which is good. But anyway, that band started with a friend of mine who I was in a band with in Houston before I moved here. He was going to Rice at the time, and he graduated, and he moved here, and then we just kind of started the band real fast. Like, I had this idea. I was like, you know, let's definitely dress 70s and, you know, act 70s and write, you know, songs that sound like it's the 70s. And we were literally together. I had 2 gigs for my own band booked with David Garza, who was, at the time, David Garza and the Love Beats. Or maybe it was just David when, or whatever. He and I have been friends for a long time as well. And so he had us open for him here and in Houston, and he had a huge following. So our first shows, we played in front of like 400 people. The first week we were a band, and then the next week, I think we opened for Bob Schneider's band, Joe Rockhead, and then, like, literally the first 2 weeks of the band, we got a weekly residency at Steamboat where we had to learn, you know, we were writing tons of songs, like a few songs a week, and, like, learning all these cover songs, because we had, like, 2 hours to fill, you know, every week, and then Jan Merkin became our manager, in that same first 2 week period.
Oh, wow.
And then I sold my car and bought a van for our band, and everyone quit their jobs, and we were on the road all the time. Like, within 2 weeks of being a band. And it worked out great. You know, back then there was a real, I feel like an old guy now, but back then there was a real, you could really go out and make a living just playing gigs, you know, with your band, if your band was cool, you know. And people liked it, you know. You could go out, you know, all the time.
If you didn't mind being away and on the road, and how did you like that lifestyle?
I mean, I grew up like that, you know. Like my mom, we traveled a lot. We lived in a tent in Mexico for years when I was a little kid, and you know, just traveling around in a Volkswagen van. And to me, it's very natural to be like that. And then also, once I got old enough to actually start going on the road, I had known so much about the road and heard so much about the road, you know, from other musicians, that I was just so excited to be there. And I love it. I mean, that's a whole, it's interesting because there's you know, there's part of my life that when I'm in here and I'm working, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to play gigs. I don't want to, you know, I don't want to go on tour. The last thing, I want to wake up every day and just come in here and do stuff. But then when I'm on the road, I feel the way, you know, that way about that. I'm like, oh, I don't want to do anything else. This is great. Every day I'm in a different city, you know.
So then, like I said, when I met you was around the time that you had, you were now in a band called Goudie, your name, and you got discovered by Lars Ulrich. So let's talk about how that went down.
That went down. That was actually a great experience for me. I had a band. It was before it was called Goudie. It was me and this guy Einar, who was in Goudie. You remember, he was part of our whole crew in the summer of 2001. And, let's see, Kyle Schneider, the drummer, the three of us had a band, and a guy that worked at Hamstein Publishing here in town, Scottish guy named Martin Hanlon, went to go see this band from Houston called the Jinkies.
I think I remember that band.
They were like a little pop band. Well, he was going to go see this band, the Jinkies, and I guess he got there too late, and we were the band on after the Jinkies. So he thought he was watching the Jinkies, and he thought we were amazing. And when we all left, I guess, right after the show, and then one of the Jinkies people came up to him, and he was like, "Oh, so who was that guy I just saw?"
Oh, okay.
So somehow Todd Wolfson was friends with this guy, and they got to talking, and Wolfson showed him some pictures, and that guy was like, "Oh my God, I saw this guy the other night. Who is this?" He was like, "That's Johnny Goudie." He's like, "I think he's, great. I want to work with him. Call him." And Todd called me. I was at my house. He was like, "Come over. This guy really wants to meet you." And so I went over there, and this guy was so passionate. I couldn't understand a word he said. He was so Scottish, and I'd never really hung out with Scottish people. I just remember the whole first meeting, all I said was, "Yeah," because he was so excited about everything, and he was saying stuff about music and recording for free and stuff. So I'm like, "Yeah, sure, okay."
All that, yes.
So he tried real hard to get me a publishing deal, and then he ended up hooking me up with Jane Weedland from the Go-Go's to write, and he got Jim Kerr from the Simple Minds to manage Goudie, which he did for a while, his brother and he. They shopped us to every label, and we put Goudie together. Me and Martin and Einar got together, and we got Bill Leffler to play drums, Jimmy Messer and guitar. And then it turned out that all of us we were all just working towards this one goal. I'd stopped playing shows, and I was working at my friend Jill's clothing store Therapy. I was working there, and Martin didn't want the band to play and become a quote-unquote Austin, just kind of like, "Hey, we're here on Tuesdays," kind of thing. So we just didn't play gigs. We just wrote songs, and we rehearsed, 4 days a week, and all I did was write songs in the time. We wrote a ton of songs, and he went out and shopped stuff, and there was a publisher at Warner Chappell that he gave our music to. That guy loved it. He was hiring this guy that was the drummer for the Grays, Dan McCarroll, to be an A&R guy. And Dan loved our music, and then Dan at the same time got offered a job by Lars to be an A&R guy for a label that he was starting. And when Lars asked him, "What would you sign first?" he gave him our disc, and Lars listened to it and was like, "Let's do it." And so
cool. That
was it.
Well, before I came over here, I actually listened to your newest, El Paso, and Peep Show, sort of back to back.
I've never done that.
And there's
was it weird?
It was not weird, but there was a distinct difference that you could tell. Like, the Peep Show is a little bit more angsty. It's sort of driven and charged up, I guess. I don't want to call it dark, because it's not dark by any means, and I think
to me
your lyrics are sort of similar across albums in terms of themes,
right?
But just the feel is completely different, because your newest album is very playful, I think, and fun.
Thanks.
And fun. So, obviously over the past 10 years, a lot of things have happened to you to get you from that. When Goudie broke up, what are the kind of things that you've done in the interim up until this point? Lots of things I know about. Yeah, lots of different things.
Well, when I first broke up Goudie, I was working on a solo album that I was going to put out, and then I just lost my steam by the time it was time to come out, and I think I pressed 100 copies of it or something. So it was going to be my manifesto, that record. I was going to release a record that I'd done all by myself in my little room. And I finished doing that, and I became friends with a guy named Casey McPherson who had a band called Endosheen. I was so discouraged after, the Peep Show experience, and then going to a smaller label and doing the Effects of Madness record with Goudie. And then trying to totally do it on my own after that. I felt beaten down, I was exhausted. And it was exciting that Endosheen had just made this record. They had just finished making it, and they gave it to me. I was leaving to Galveston to go spend a week with my family, and I literally listened to not the first Endosheen record, it's the second one, from Austin to Galveston. Just kept on starting it over, and I was like, played it for my cousins when I got there. I have a really tight family, and I run stuff by my cousins all the time. And I was like, "What do you guys think? Should I join this band?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, this is this band's like going somewhere. You could feel it. Like there was you were around then. You could kind of feel something, something exciting was happening, and I felt like I could add stuff to their live show. The record was done, so here was my chance to kind of learn parts and then add to another band as an outsider, So it was a whole new experience for me. I'd done tons of sideman stuff with people, but this was my first real side gig,
Keyboards
and guitar.
Right, okay.